I disagree that, that this should have been moved to the action agenda. If we're going to do that, then the superintendent needs to tell us these kinds of things 24 hours prior.
We're going to go back to the agenda, Mr. Carr. Thank you.
But you're not going to acknowledge what I'm saying? I'm just going to say that if you're not going to, if your guys are going to play these stupid games, I'm not going to, submit myself and subject myself to it, because you're just playing games that he's over here hiring people that without board approval, and then when I try to question it within parliamentary procedures, right? And then you see, and the public sees this for what it is. You guys are just playing games, and there's no reason for me to sit here and entertain you guys on this, because then you don't leave any room to discuss things and to provide the checks and balances that this form of government calls for.
All right, I'm calling for order now. We voted on the consent agenda. Now we'll return to the regular agenda, and it begins with highlights from the Indian Hills School Improvement Plan. Oh, I don't think there were any requests to speak that I know of.
There weren't.
We looked at the list. Yes, I'm sorry.
There were not.
One last thing is just a comment's been made 3 or 4 times now in a public meeting about trying to suggest that there's some need for checks and balances between the board and the superintendent. And I just want to tell you that's just silly. That's just uninformed rhetoric, that there is no legislative and executive branch of a school district. Janet and I are your employees, appointed officials. We're on the same team. It's not a balancing act, it's a collaborative venture, and I just want that to be clear, and that people ought not speak about creating divisions. They ought to speak about working together on the best interest of kids.
That's the important piece about board and superintendent and business administrator relationship, that we should always be striving for is a collaborative nature.
Yeah.
In the best interest of kids, in the best interest of kids.
And we've had Michael Clare has been his name's been brought up, and he was brought before this committee. I don't know who invited him to come, but he spoke, and some of those of us addressed it, and I think his example goes to the core of where I would differ with you, having but I would just caution you to not establish a culture where the person who does speak out, who does disagree, who wants to fight for people he or she thinks are underrepresented within the system, that somehow they're ostracized or belittled because they're doing what they feel is very important. And sometimes they think they have to speak louder because they're not being heard. Now I'll just end with this. I was a city council member on the west side, represented the Rose Park area. And I can tell you, and this is why I encourage Michael to speak up, and I'll do it again. I can tell you during my time of service, and up until my time of service, the west side did not receive all the advantages of the rest of the city. And I spoke loudly about that. And things began to change. And as to the relationship of the superintendent and the board, from my perspective, the primary function in our form of government is for the board to provide oversight, or the legislature, in the case of the relationship between the governor and the legislature, is to provide oversight of the administration, first and foremost, above all other considerations, because the administration it executes policies, procedures, administrations that may or may not be fair to all those who are the recipients of that execution. And somebody has to represent in the system those who may be harmed by that execution, and have to remind administration, and sometimes in no uncertain terms, that this is not right, it's not fair, and people are being harmed.